Good evening and welcome to another edition of the Magpie Circle. Still top of the league. Not quite 8 straight wins on the trot. A blank weekend. We'll be finding out what Stell was up to and what the rest of you were up to. Off to Southend we will go. And I've got to say, anyone that goes down to Southend, total respect, with the option of being able to watch it live on television. Clearly that's something you won't be exercising, Stell. Good evening to you. Oh, blimey. Oh, dear
me.
Hey.
That's foreboding. A good start, that is, yeah.
Hey, let's get far on
fell off
that.
its little gantry, yeah.
That was a trip somewhere. You got trip stuff. Force of habit going down in the box.
I was going to say, yeah, definitely a penalty. Definite. VAR's had a look at it. It's guaranteed. Yes, evening.
So seldom could a show go more wrong when the first question to the main guest is evening. And then,
yes, it's the difficult ones that always flummox me, Paul. That's the problem.
Oh dear. Okay, thoughts and views. Chloe will be with us shortly. She's en route back from Milan. Plane's got a bit delayed, but she should be joining us within the next half an hour. David Shorter says, evening, Paul. See you at Southend. Ian Birchnell, evening all. The same from Paul Huskisson. Pythagorean, evening all. Forum, take from the forum. Owners measured responses. Room to buy if we need to. Shane Walker, evening all. Really enjoyed the forum. It's nice to know that we're in good hands. Nick G, get in. Ian Birchnell, most open and honest discussions at forum I've seen us have. Some great discussions with Luke and fans after the event too. Really think we have a good one in Luke Williams. Karen Knight, hello everyone. Crispy, hi all. Won't be making trip to Southend tomorrow, but will be down in Eastleigh on Saturday. Still, so no game at the weekend after our strategic withdrawal from the FA Cup. What was you up to? Doing very little, recharging the batteries for a short midweek trip to Southend?
Well, yeah, you'd have thought so. You won't believe, I did actually get to a game on Saturday. You wouldn't believe it. I went to watch, and it's a long, boring story, but I went to watch Worksop Town play Brighouse. So I wasn't scouting. I wasn't doing anything like that. A mate of mine, ex-Notts player, Jamie Forrester, he works for the manager at Worksop. So he says, you fancy coming along? When you got a free weekend, we said we'd go along. And it was all right. They won. Well, they were 4-0 up when we sort of called it a day, 5 minutes from the end. Some decent players. Yeah, some decent players. Nice little 3G, 4G pitch. But yeah, not my usual scenario. But yeah, that's where I went. Worksop against Brighouse. Beat that.
Was Terry Hawkridge playing? Because he was at Worksop start of the season.
Terry Hawkridge fired in an absolute worldie for the first goal, playing central midfield for Worksop. 25-yarder, top corner. Great goal, great finish.
Yeah, well, continuing the Terry Hawkridge theme, my lads' team is Magpie United, not Sunday League Division 3. And we played Park Tavern, pub Cinderhill, back of Vernon Park, second or third game of the season. And we're getting ready to go out, and my lads got out, and I'm getting ready to take the warm-up and everything. And I see this lad in like a park and a coat, a little lad, and he's limping along, and he's going to run the line. Fair play. My lad nudges me. He goes, that's Terry Hawkridge. I says, he's not Terry Hawkridge, is it going to be running the line Sunday morning, not Sunday League Division 3 for Park Tavern? He says, no, it is. So I thought I'll go over and have a word. I said, excuse me, you're not by any chance Terry Hawkridge, are you? I'm a big Notts fan. He says, yes, mate, yeah, I know who you are, blah, 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 blah. And he got a dead leg from playing for Worksop, and one of his mates or something plays for Park Tavern. So they made him run the line. So he ran the line walked the line for 90 minutes with a dead leg, which I've got to say, fair play to the lad, fully paid up pro a few years ago, running the line, scruffy arse rovers Sunday morning.
He'd probably beat a lot of the National League officials, wouldn't he?
Very good, Stal. Chris Jordan, Luke Williams was superb at the forum. Husky got a drum for away games. Get ready for some atmosphere. I'm not a drum man, Husky. Got to tell you, to each their own, but not for me. Still, okay. We all know what happened last week. Draw after you said we would win the league by 10 points. Don't want to bring that up too early in the programme.
Hey, I stand by it. I said if we play the way they were playing, I stand by it. I still stand by that. But I don't say we will. But if they carried on playing how we play, I stand by that. I might change my mind in about 6 months' time.
As long as it's not 2 weeks.
Well, yeah.
So, 2 away games coming up now. Southend, Eastleigh, clocking the miles up. We've had a break. How much do you read into? We've had a break. How much do you buy into? Players who are a bit jaded against Bromley. You can't play 2 games a week all the time, etc., etc. My only counterpoint to that is it's the same for every team in the National League. So for me, I don't think you necessarily gain an advantage one way or t'other, because you're playing teams that are basically playing the same number of games as you are. Do you attach any credence to that going into these 2 games now?
Not a great deal. I mean, I think they'll always be glad of having a week on the training ground. I think particularly now, so with Luke Williams and Ryan Harley, football is very technical, very tactical, and they like to get the work done on the training ground. When they see things that when everything's going well, that's all well and good. But again, I've caught up on the fan forum. I had to listen to it myself and caught everything he said. And, again, really impressed with what was said. But I think they like to do the work on the training ground. So having a week between games, yes, of course, we wanted to be in the FA Cup and involved in that. Of course, we did. But not being involved, then you've got to make the most of it. And that's where I think they will have enjoyed having a full week of training in preparation of 2 really difficult away games. Difficult because of the journeys. Both teams offering different sort of opposition and a different test. And they can so to get a full week's work into that, off the back of Bromley, where, as Luke said in the forum, there was they had too many chances for his liking. I know we had loads, but they had too many. And a little bit of that came through, and believe it or not, at Wealdstone. And I don't think you were there, were you, Paul? But even though we won it 6-1, they could have had 3, maybe 4 goals. So we gave up too many chances in the game where we won 6-1. But as he says, sometimes results and scorelines mask what actually happens in a game. Not saying Notts weren't fantastic, but they're just signs that they were just conceding 1 or 2 chances, 1 or 2 too many. And as Luke Williams, he gives off, and I'm sure it is right, that he's got the highest standards for the players, that even when they win 6-1, it's not good enough, and there's things to still work on. And then I think that led into the Bromley game, where Bromley could have had, I mean, if that had finished 5-4 to Notts, or 4-4, or 3-3, I don't think anyone would complain. There were real good chances at both ends. So I think he will just have liked the timing of having a week to go to, 2 away games, Southend and Eastleigh.
Is this one of those occasions where perhaps he can just get into the players a bit? If they start believing their own publicity a bit too much and all the rest of it. And I remember Howard Wilkinson when Notts got promoted in the Jurassic era in 1981. And he used a phrase in the interview. Notts had started that well that season when they got promoted. They went to West Ham, and it would have been about end of October. And West Ham battered Notts 3-0. And Howard said, looking over the course of a season, he said that worked in our favour. He said, because we got beat at the right time. And Howard's argument for that was Howard could get into them, just drop them down a peg and say, hang on a minute, you might be top at the minute, get yourself sorted. That's the benchmark, get yourselves back on it. Is there possibly an element of that for Luke in the past 7 days?
I don't know about the last 7 days, but I think he's shown examples of that this season when, Notts have won games, but he's not been particularly pleased or overly pleased with the performance. Now, prior to Bromley with the run of wins before that, you're thinking the performances are all about spot on. But I think he drives standards. I don't think he's ever fully happy, always looking to improve, always looking for more. And I don't think he's the sort of manager, head coach that will let the players rest on their laurels. Whether he's used this week, I don't think he's used this week particularly to sort of tear into them, because I don't think that's necessary. But I think it will be more to work on some technical aspects, some some sort of out of possession or transitional phases of play, turnover of possessions. I thought he was quite in depth when he spoke at the forum, when he was saying about, wanting to win the ball back within 2 of the stripes of grass on the pitch, 2 at the dark patch and the light patch, and wanting to win the ball back before the opposition get through 2 of them. And that's it. And I think it's just little bits like that. At times when you play a high press, if teams can get past that high press, then you play a lot of 1v1 football defensively. And I just think in the last couple of games, we've given up more chances than we have done in a number of games before
that. Right. Welcome to Chloe. Chloe, you've hot-footed it back from Milan, correct?
Yes, correct. Straight
now,
on
you would have missed Stell and I talking about our footballing weekends. Stell went to workshop. Oh, blimey. Stell's having a mare tonight. He's now disappeared altogether. But anyway, we're talking Geo for the minute. So Stell went to workshop against Brighouse. I don't know whether the Rastrick band were there as well, to go with Chris Husky's drum. I was at Magpie United, giant killing, not Sunday League, Sunday morning trophy, I don't know what it was, giant killing act over Stratford Haven 3-2, as we welcome back Stell. You're having a mare, Stell, bloody hell.
The gremlins are in down this end, obviously. Hi, Chloe.
Nice.
We're just saying, you were at workshop. I was on Sunday morning duty for Magpie United. Chloe, I think you edged us slightly, and probably just about every other member of the Magpie Circle flock. Reveal all. Where were you getting your footballing fix?
Yes, so I was at the San Siro watching AC Milan. So they won 2-1 with a last-minute goal from Giroud. So it had everything you kind of wanted. And for £12, and there's not a Notts game, what else are you supposed to do?
12 quid? 12 quid, yeah.
Yeah, I think it was €14 and the exchange rate was about 12 quid.
Very cheap, yeah. They played Spezia, didn't they? Who were kind of, one of the much, much smaller clubs. What was the crowd like? What was the atmosphere like there?
Oh, it was incredible. I mean, they didn't stop all game. It's really funny to compare it to English fans. So it's constant, no matter whether there's been a bad pass or they're bad in possession or whatever. You wouldn't notice unless you were watching the game. You'd have no idea something had happened. But it's crazy. They don't stop. And we were kind of behind like what you would know like as the cop end. So we were like just above all like the big maniac fans, flags going, flares going. And obviously a last minute winner, it went mental. So I think it holds 80 and there was 77,000. Obviously, like you say, them being a smaller club, the away end was a lot more empty. But the rest of it, all the home end had sold out. So, yeah, it was really good. And obviously wanting to get to the San Siro before it got knocked down inevitably in the next few years. So it's an incredible ground. And just the like build up to the match. There's like a few different, they're kind of like not temperamental, but like these little pubs on the grass around it that have like an opening to sit outside. So we were sat in there and they actually showed a documentary. It's on Sky Sports at the minute talking about Forest, but we got a little mention. So whilst I was sat in this little pub outside the San Siro, I was seeing Meadow Lane and it was just mental. But yeah, the one thing I must say is having to watch a match that has VAR in the stadium, it's horrible. I mean, I'm sure we'll get onto refereeing decisions in the Bromley game, etc. But there was quite a few different decisions, but there was one, it must have taken 4 minutes and the crowd's just going mental at this point. But yeah, it was a really good experience. And like I say, what else are you supposed to do when there's no...
Oh, you're just, we're losing a little bit there, Chloe, but we'll come back very shortly. You've just frozen. Stell, here we go. You know my views on stats. Dale Pikett's chimed in here. Nice stat here, guys. Points per game so far. The top 3. Notts. You used to say 2 points, win and lose, win home, draw away will get you up. I'm not sure it does at the minute. Notts average points per game, 2.43. Wrexham, 2.25. Chesterfield, 1.99. So a bit of mental arithmetic there. Notts are going to be well above a ton. as are Wrexham, and Chesterfield are going to be 92 and finishing third. If that's the way it carries on, dear lads, we have a great chance of going up. Husky says Wrexham home to Farnborough pretends to be shocked. Right. Are we still looking at a ton points, do you think, Stel? Or do you think as clubs drop points here and there, your mid-90s will be enough? Well, is it going to be that exceptional season?
It could well be. It could well be an exceptional season because, and I was having a conversation with, and I forget who it was at the ground last week at Bromley's game, saying that I feel, based on what we've seen this season, based on other results as well, so there's a bit of guesswork in it, but from what we've seen with Notts, I think there's a bigger gap between the top 2 or 3, or 3 or 4, or whatever you want to call it, and then the rest. I think there's a bigger gap than we've ever seen it in the National League. I think there's a lot of, I say, sort of mediocre teams, but I think there are. I think there are a lot of teams that haven't got a chance of pushing us, Wrexham, Chesterfield, Solihull, teams like that. I think there's a lot of teams that are just jockeying for the outside playoff position, if you like. And I think there's a bigger drop off in standard this season. Not right at the top. I think us, Wrexham, as I said, them teams, I think the standard is really high. I think the rest of the division, and I don't know whether it's any sort of hangover from COVID, clubs altering budgets, what have you. I don't know. I don't know what the reason for it is. But that's just the perception that I've had of the season, of the league this season. I think it's sort of still the same strength at the top, real strength at the top. But I think there's a lot of teams that, and again, part of it might be credit to Notts for how well they've played and how comfortably they've taken care of business, if you like, against the teams we've played against. But I don't think it's a particularly strong average of the league, if you like. At the top, yeah, strong, obviously Wrexham, Notts. But I think there's a lot of teams that are, so-so, in terms of the league. And I think we've had a few more stronger teams in previous seasons.
Chloe, what's your take? And then we'll come on to your news in a minute. I know you've put it out a little bit, but big money move from the Magpie Circle. But before we come on to that, Park Milan and what that's like. Bromley last week. What's your take on where we are in the grand scheme of things at the moment?
I mean, we can't complain we're top of the league. That's kind of all that needs to be said. I think we've spoken about it before. We haven't really spent a lot of time at all since we've been down here, top of the league. So as long as that keeps going on, kind of the better. Like you were saying, the points per game average is brilliant at the minute. And we haven't lost at home, which is great. Obviously, we drew against Bromley, but it was one of the better oppositions we've seen this season, obviously. I think a draw was probably a fair result in terms of chances. And then you kind of bring the refereeing decisions into it. But you're going to have games like that. We were definitely tested and we didn't lose at the end of the day. We're still fighting up there with Wrexham. We've got 2 tough games coming up, away at Southend and away at Eastleigh, and I think that will prove everything. I think as much as everyone was really disappointed about the FA Cup, maybe it was a bit of blessing in disguise. We've now had obviously this little bit of a break, get players back, get them rested, like I say, go through tactics, and I'm sure we'll be absolutely fine. But like Stal says, I completely agree. I really think it's a 2-horse race, to be completely honest. I think obviously we'll be getting pushed by teams like Chesterfield, Solihull, but I still think there'll be a little bit of a gap between the top 2 and then maybe 2 or 3 more, and then an even bigger gap, a drop off for the rest of the playoff spots. But it's going to be really interesting. We're only a couple of months into the season. We've got a long way to go. We've got January just around the corner, so you never know what's going to happen. But at this moment in time, I couldn't be happier personally, and we'll see where we go from here.
All right. I suspect this will spark debate and messages on the chat board. Referees, Stel and Chloe. Now, a lot of people, I think, were very vociferous. Referee Bromley last week, and and other refereeing performances. We'll come on to my thoughts in a minute, but I'll get your twos first. And I think everyone else, chuck your thoughts and views out on the message boards. What's your take on refereeing standards, National League? Because a lot of people did, and I think I caught a tail end of your piece driving back home, and I think you were quite critical of the referee last week.
There were a couple of bits, that I think we could have questioned. I think we did actually praise him for one bit, getting the right decision. And we do try, when refs do get it right, we do try to praise it because it seems quite infrequent that actually happens. Well, like I say, I'm always try and be honest and give my opinion. If I'm honest, I don't think the standard's particularly great from what I've seen. I don't just mean this season. I think, and the National League over the 3.5 seasons that we've had, I don't think the standard's great. Again, there's reasons behind that, and it's very easy to criticise refs. Of course it is. It's a difficult job. It's a job that they always say about why don't we get ex-players to do it? Well, players know what stick they give referees and what they get from the crowd. So players, although they're quite daft, they're not daft enough to become referees on the whole. So it's a difficult job. It's a thankless job, a completely thankless task. But I think you sort of, much like players, you get what you get at the standard you are at. And everyone can talk about, Premier League refs not being the best, whatever. I think you get the standard that you're at. And yes, there'll be those refs that are looking to move up, and they will do. But in general, do I think the quality? I think if you look across football, I think the game is that fast now as well. Players are athletes, it's physical, and there's so much. Let's have it. There's so much conning the refs and the officials, and so much diving or going down easy and things like that it makes the job even harder. I've been an advocate for a long while, and I don't know why, even back to my playing days, that why referees do not go in and train with professional clubs. Obviously you can't, attach yourself to professional clubs, and you can't then get to know them and referee their games. But I just think it's the only way they'll get to know what goes off in a game. What really happens between professionals, what really happens on a pitch. I see a lot of naivety from the officiating, and it's a little bit frustrating, like it is for everybody. But again, you want better officials getting a better division. I think that, unfortunately, that is the bottom line.
A few comments, then we'll come to Chloe's thoughts. Chris Jordan, Bromley's referee had a great game. I was wondering whether he has a release clause in his contract, says Chris, with a small dollop, I think, of sarcasm there. Ian Birchinall, ref was poor against Bromley, but didn't cost us the win. Take our chances and we win. And Bromley don't time waste. Yeah. Jurgen Halligan, blatant time wasting by Bromley should have delayed them coming back on the pitch. Hi all from Maggie Grant. Chris B, if players going down, there's not much referees can do. Still baffled by the stop in play for head injury, brackets no foul, and ball given back to Bromley keeper. Ian Birchall, I'm just grateful we don't have VAR. Current officials are frustrating enough without adding in VAR officials too. Chloe, what's your take on the refs?
I mean, I think we've known for a long time that they're not up to standard, but that goes from the Premier League all the way down. But we're just kind of getting the bottom end of it. But like Stav says, it's what league we're in. That's kind of what you're going to have to deal with. They've not got any better since we've been down here, so we can't expect them to. I think they've been probably poor throughout the season as well as the last few seasons we've been down here, but the only reason we really go into depth about refereeing decisions is when we don't get the result that we wanted. So I think we were really frustrated, I know me personally, at the Bromley game, that it was very end-to-end, and like someone said in the comments, we definitely missed chances, but so did they. I think Slocum had a really good game, like one-on-ones and things like that, made some great saves. So like I say, without the refereeing decisions, I think a draw was probably a fair result. But then I think he could have cost us a game. I think there could have been one, if not two, maybe penalties in there. And I think he didn't kill the game early. He didn't a lot of the better referees make their stamp early on in a game, give it maybe an early card or anything to just be in control. Whereas at the Bromley game, the referee wasn't in control of the game at all from the first minute to the last. And we talk about players going down in the box. Every time in the last, 20 minutes, we got the ball into the box, one of them fell over, and that was it. The free kick was given. So it was frustrating when you see referees like that, when the decisions aren't going your way, but when the result isn't either. Whereas I think if we'd have won the game 3-0, we'd have been like, yeah, the ref wasn't good enough, but we move on. We're not bothered. We won 3-0, end of conversation. But they definitely aren't good enough. We've seen decisions all season go either for or against us, whether rightly or wrongly. But it is frustrating, but kind of what can you do about it? If we took our chances, don't get me wrong, we win the game, we get annoyed at the ref, but it's done and we've won. It's just more frustrating when that result is maybe hindered by a referee. It's hard to say after a game. It's easy to say, oh, we lost the game because of the referee. Well, if you take your chances, it doesn't really go that way. But we were definitely hindered by the decisions, and it is definitely frustrating. But we didn't lose. He didn't cost us the game in terms of a loss. So we'll see where we go in the end of the season, but I'm expecting a similar quality throughout the rest of the season. So hopefully we can see past that and just keep doing what we're doing.
Jurgen Halligan agreed. Chloe, Slocum's best game for me. Sam was my MOM for Bromley game, says Ian Birchinall. Jurgen Halligan, read the referees. Do what they do in rugby, let trainer on and carry on with play. Derek Flowers, let's not be like those over the river, blaming refs. We should have taken our chances to win comfortably. Like I said before, I'm hoping to have Howard Webb on before he starts full-time to try and sort out the whole VAR situation back in England. Been in sorting it out in the MLS in the US for a while now. Look, I mean, I take a slightly different view on this. Look, as you've mentioned, Stel, the refs in this division are not going to be as good as the Football League, in the same way as the teams and the players aren't going to be as good. So if we say the refs aren't as good, well, clearly they're not, right? Because we're not as good. If we were any good, we'd still be in the Football League. So there's levels, isn't there? So I think for a start, you've got to accept the referees are not going to be as good as they are in the Football League for obvious reasons. And personally, I think refs have to officiate with their hands tied behind both back. They can never say anything to anyone. I think a lot of the time, not the case with you, Stel, a lot of pundits on the telly do not know the rules. They will say, in my day, that challenge is perfectly fair, right? But it's not their day, right? And the rules have changed. So that even if you get a touch on the ball now, to use one example, and your momentum carries through and you clatter into the player, doesn't matter if you touch the ball first. It's deemed a dangerous or reckless challenge. Now, how many people listening and watching now fully understand and fully appreciate that? But that is the way, one interpretation of a rule, right? Rightly or wrongly, that's what they've got to do. So the old, he got the ball first, a little bit of the ball first, it doesn't count now. And we kind of, refs can't come out, explain these things, and they might they make bad decisions. I mean, but managers themselves, it's a game now where you heap so much blame. You transfer your own mistakes onto that of a referee. I think I've said before, how many times do we see a manager say, we lost the game or drew the game because of the referee's decision? How many times does a manager ever say, we only won that game because we got a penalty? They never do. Oh, well, we deserved to, and all the rest of it. And I don't want to single Forest out, take on poor Derek's comment, but talk about hypocrisy when you hear Steve Cooper moaning to high heavens about penalty decisions, VAR decisions, and everything else from the weekend. They're only in the Premier League because there was a blatant penalty or two not given against them in the playoff final. And I'm not decrying that. But Steve Cooper then don't say the only reason we got in the Premier League is because the ref didn't give a penalty to Huddersfield when he should have done. So I think the whole thing is so stacked against referees that I think they've got a near impossible task. And I would agree with you, Stel. I think you've got to look very creatively at the way refs officiate. We're never going to have VAR at this level of the game in the conference, are we? Because it's too expensive. But I don't know whether you can ever get to a point where you have two refs I think it's an interesting argument about trialing. Players being treated and having to go off. Use the National League as a bit of a test bed for something that's a bit different. That things like timekeeping. Should timekeeping be taken out of the referee's hands, and the fourth official or somebody else does the timekeeping, or just maybe little things here and there that you can take off from the ref that clearly is a major problem. And still, I mean, and I know, managers will tell you as players certain tricks of the trade, right? And Neil Warnock is a classic example of that, and he's a legend to all of us at Notts. He knows how to play the system better than just about anyone. And if you remember, we've got Eastleigh on Saturday. I don't know if you were at the game. We lost 2-0 to Eastleigh. I think it was last year. If you remember, they scored the first goal. Bloke headed it in, far post. And then he tripped over the post as he was going down, right? And I watched him. And then he pretended he got a head injury, right? His head didn't touch the post, nothing. Now that, and then when you watch Eastleigh again and you see a few more games when they score a goal, the player somehow or other ends up with a head injury. Well, that's because it's an instruction from the manager. Go down, we've just scored, make the opposition think about the trailing. Let's just slow it down. We're 1-0 up, make them think, have a 2-minute break. And as Donna Reardon said on this programme, Neil used to tell them when Notts went in front, player go down injured within a minute of going in front. And these are all tricks and rules. I mean, can we seriously expect refs to ever stamp that out 100%?
Well, I mean, you're absolutely right. It's gone on forever and a day. I mean, clear as day. Nowadays, with the protocol, football has changed with the rules. They'll find a way around bending the rules. Foot managers, coaches, they'll find a way to play the rules. The thing you'd say is that when Notts are winning and we're talking about managing the game out, we don't care about it. We want players,
But this is my point.
So it's got to be, and I suppose that backs up your point. It's not, or it's difficult for the refs to take it on themselves to police it and do whatever. Top line is the laws of the game need to change quickly with how the game changes. There's that much diving, going down easily, all that, but that's for the laws of the game. Yes, the referees have interpretations, but everyone's ref's interpretation is slightly different. 5 years ago, Frank, you talk about VAR there, we will never have it at the National League level. Well, frankly, do we want it? The way it's been implemented in football, I was a big advocate for it 5, 6, 7 years before it came in. I thought video replays, video reffing, because the game's that fast. There's so much hinging on decisions that video refs got to be the way forward. The way it's been implemented, I'm not saying there is no use for video, but the way it's been implemented and used, and as Chloe said there, an example of being in the stadium in Milan and it being terrible, I would now say I would completely change. I'm happy to go, do you know what? The way it is, I would get rid of it completely. Just keep the goal line technology, but get rid of VAR, go back to the referee making the decision, having control of the game. Because do you know what? Yes, there were talking points, but was it any worse, any better? I know the stats might say we get to more correct decisions, but it's the way about it, and it's what it does for the match day experience, which was something else that people spoke about at this fans forum. The match day experience, as Chloe's had there, 4 minutes waiting on a decision of VAR. I think it's another example of the the people that run the game not having a clue about the game, not being in touch with the game per se, and then to bring it back to Notts and the time wasting and the tricks of the trade. Nowadays, if I was coach, manager, anywhere, or player in a dressing room, if I was defending a set piece or a corner and you get the first contact to it or it gets put out, as we saw in the Bromley game, I'd be telling somebody, hit the deck, you've got a head injury, the game gets stopped. We get time to reorganise no matter what.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
If the ball, and this is the bit we had to hold on and said we weren't sure of this part of the law, is that Notts had the ball inside the Bromley penalty area when the ref blew for a head injury.
Yes.
But because it's still in the penalty area, the play restarts with the defensive team's goalkeeper. Now, you won't believe that players are sharp enough to spot things like, but I'd be going, hey, if that's the rule, you head the ball, you go down with a head injury. And whoever it's with, if it's with us or them and in the penalty area, we get the ball back with our goalkeeper, or should do. Of course, you're playing a little bit of fast and loose that the referee's going to blow up as quick as he did against Bromley. But, you know, as long as the ball is not on your 6-yard line, you know, I'd be saying go down with a head injury. The other side of it is the cramp nowadays. Cramp is the one that you don't need the physio on for. So if you want to break in play, go down with cramp. And you would have to look, if we're under the cosh a little bit, you know, and I'm not saying that's not in any game whatsoever, but get down with cramp. You don't need the physio on. You get your nearest player, come over, have a little chat, ask him what you're doing tomorrow, where you're taking the missus for a nice meal, whatever. Pull his calves up, push his toes up, no problem. We get 30 seconds break from the game. All the other players can get across, have a drink if they want. No physio comes on, so you don't go down to 10 men. So that's what I would do, and that's what I'm sure you see it with your own eyes. It's what managers and coaches are doing. So that's where the laws of the game and the people who are running, administrating the game, have got to catch up. They've got to realise what's going on. But this is the problem, when the people who make the laws don't realise what's actually happening in the game, not until it's too late. Because, believe it or not, I know players not renowned for being the brightest and the most intelligent, but when it comes to football intelligence, they are.
Yeah.
Well, either way, not the brightest. But either way, you know, they will find a way of bending the rules, pushing the rules, finding an advantage if there is. And we can all say, you know, it's not right, it's not how it should be, but it is how it is. Whether it's right, wrong, indifferent, and we're okay with it when it's not. We're not so okay with it when it's anybody else doing it against us. But again, the referees need to be aware of what's going on, but they've got to have laws that they can implement that help them, you know, officiate what's going on and you know, try and find a way of cutting it out. It's difficult. It is really, really difficult. But, you know, I just don't think they've got enough football know-how, not real professional football know-how of all the people get dark arts or whatever, the twist in the gamesmanship, you know, all that sort of thing. That it happens. You know, unfortunately, it's not this lovely game that we all play. You know, oh, sorry, tripped you up, pick you up, don't worry about it, dust you. You know, it's not like that. It's a professional win at all cost mentality. And the officiating and the lawmakers have got to step up for me. They've got to become a little bit more up to speed with the ways of the game.
Chloe, it's been visited a few times. What would you say about miking up refs?
It's a difficult one because, especially, I think it's difficult because if you're talking about through the TV, if you're talking about miking refs up so that people watching on TV can hear it, is a different story whether you're miking them up and the whole ground can hear it. I think it's difficult because me personally, I want to know what's going on, because what I'm watching and the decision they're coming to can sometimes be completely opposite. And I would love to know what the conversation is and how on earth they've got to that. But it is difficult. I don't know, are you exposing referees too much, or do they need to be exposed? I personally would like to trial it. I think before, like you say, maybe in the National League and do it on the PA system before going straight into the Premier League. But it's a really tough one. I just think with decisions that you can't seem to understand from VAR, because let's be honest, VAR is still getting it wrong. We say it's clear and obvious, but half the time, well, is it clear and obvious? It's so difficult, but it's awful being in the stands. So this is one of the first times I've experienced VAR being in the stands, because obviously we don't have anything like it. And we can maybe understand some decisions more in the National League, because maybe the ref's in the wrong position. Obviously, it's still annoying, but they've got video replays of the same photo in 10 different angles or slow motion. I don't understand how they're still kind of getting it wrong when you're watching it on the screen, and it's like, how have you possibly come to that decision? But being in the stands, we had no idea. Some of the decisions, you wouldn't know, because obviously we were quite high up. We have no idea why they're even reviewing it. Do you know what I mean? So being in the stands, I think it'd be better to know, just to the conversation, what's happened, what they've seen, what they're trying to pick it up on. But I think it's disgusting that the game's stopping for 4 minutes. And I think, as frustrating as it is for the fans, the players don't like it either. I can guarantee you that the referee on the pitch doesn't like it either, because the pressure is all on them constantly. And I mean, in this moment in time, the away team's not liking it, the home team's not liking it, and it's just becomes this really frustrating thing where maybe it's explained a little bit more by hearing the referees. But again, I was like Stal, really pro VAR before it came in, because decisions were just getting in between really crucial games. And we all wanted it in. We've seen it used in other sports and it's flown so well. And then it's kind of come in and we're like, hang on a minute, this is even worse than what we had before. So it's difficult. I think I do really appreciate not having it at the minute, just kind of looking out from the Premier League and other European games. It's kind of ruining football a little bit, especially for the fans in the stadium. So maybe we need to try something different, scrap it all together, or I don't know. And it would be useful to kind of hear that conversation and see how they've got to their end result.
Alex Jackson says, I hate players in the ref's ears all the time, but maybe Kyle Cameron needs to be a little bit more engaged with what is happening in a game and talk to the ref. You can manage a ref with the right approach. Chris Gosling, it's when the same refs show inconsistency and decisions in decisions and punishments in the same game that winds me up. Paul Huskisson, most of the refs are at our level are part-timers. That's very true. When we had Mark Ives on, Paul, you know, the referees at this level have a day job. Yeah, that's very true. Ian Birchnell, agree, Paul. Man City get a soft penalty, and on Match of the Day on Saturday, Jermaine Jenner says City deserved it. Derek Flowers, why do average ex-players suddenly become experts on the game on Match of the Day too? Chris Gosling, I'm sure I read somewhere the ball was in play for 35 minutes against Bromley or something of that ilk, but can't take that as a gospel. Chris Jordan, timekeeping should be taken away from the ref. Derek Flowers, the Cowley brothers know how to play the system as well. They do, gesturing players to go down so they could give their players instructions. VAR, if they can't overturn decision within 30 seconds, stay with on-field decision, says Chris. Ian Birchnell, VAR also takes the emotion out of the game. I think it's something we've just been chatting about. Remy Skies back from New York. Hello, Pies. I'm only Mr. Mace. You're Lord Stallard. And Lady Chloe, says Remy. I'm just a plain old Mr. Remy. No worries, pal. Chris Gosling, VAR has been made too complex. It's the decisions where they're going back and re-referee still in the build-up that winds me up. I knew we'd get lots of thoughts on this. Chris Gosling, aren't they using an automated offside system in the World Cup? Oh, I don't know, Chris. I'm out there in 10 days. I'll find out. What else have we got? Chris, Derek Flowers, miking the refs up with our PA system, we still wouldn't know what's happening. I think that was one of the more obtuse questions. I must say, I listened to the forum, and I think Alex and Christoph deserve a diploma in patience to cope with some of the questions. I thought they did very, very well. And the PA system always crops up, doesn't it? Always crops up at every ground in the country that I'm aware of. Was the PA system any good at Milan, Chloe, or not?
Yeah, so it's bizarre that like they start chants through the speakers. So
yeah.
But it works well. But yeah, it was strangely good there.
Yeah. Remy Sky, in American football, the ref is mic'd up. He is, but only to declare rulings. May be interesting if they kept him mic'd up in the changing room after a match. What insights would we then learn? Just to square this one away, Stel, ex-players' view, because people often quote rugby, don't they? You know, and the referee speaks and talks. Although I think people in rugby would say that the amount of time that now takes for decisions to be made, not dissimilar to our VAR, is extensive. But there's a lot of talk about dissent and industrial language and those sorts of things in football. What? I'm not saying National League, but what's your thoughts, and do you think a manager stroke players' thoughts on if the ref was mic'd up? I'm not talking about being broadcast live, but kept or used as an example, or do you just think it's opening too much of a can of worms, or do you think players and managers would suddenly then think, I just need to wind it in a bit here?
Well, I think there's that famous footage, isn't there, from years ago? David Ellery was mic'd up, Tony Adams and the Arsenal players giving him all sorts of grief. And then after the game, George Graham trying to poke his head round the corners of the referee's room, and the camera's in there, and he disappears quickly. So, that would be exactly what's happening. It would be no different now.
Yeah.
Miking them up, and I certainly get it. It would be interesting. I think wasn't there was an Australian Football League referee got mic'd up and got a load of praise a couple of years or so ago for what happened out there. I think the problem you've got in this country is it's so entrenched the industrial language, shall we say, the language of the workplace, that refs do get stick.
Should they get that level of stick? Do you as an ex-player?
No, they shouldn't.
Do you as an ex-player kind of become, well, that's just what happens? Because if we open this debate out a little bit to Sunday mornings, Parks level, I'm telling you now, there is an appalling dearth of referees. There really, really is now. And those officials, county FAs, will say that there is peer pressure that filters down from seeing and hearing when you're at games and all the rest of it. At the professional level, referees fundamentally taking dog's abuse.
Absolutely. They shouldn't have to take it. I mean, and this is, maybe as part of a bigger problem, of a bigger issue that needs sorting, and it needs sorting from the top down, is that you hear, don't you, frequently, referees at Sunday football getting attacked, violently attacked, all sorts of things happening. And why would you want to get into football referee, football officiating? Because why would you go through that? Why would you put yourself in the firing line for that sort of, it's more than abuse, isn't it? Physical, your safety is at risk. So, and then, but that's where you've got to start if you want to do anything and move on to the football leagues and anything like that. So I think, the FA and everything like that, they've got to have a look at the behaviour of the top players and the top leagues, the elite leagues, which I'm including the National League in, because you're right, behaviour is watched, monitored, filtered and copied. But there's a lot of things I think that they need to crack down on. It's difficult because a lot of things are ingrained in the way things are done. I was guilty of it as a player, effing and jeffing at referees and, giving them all sorts of abuse, trying to lean on them, trying to pressure them into giving you a decision later in the game.
But managers would actually advise players to take it in turns to have a go at the ref to influence him, wouldn't they? It wouldn't be the same player, because if the player gets a yellow, or so then someone else. And for those, our flock out there, genuinely, this is what happens, and it don't just happen now. It happened 20 years ago, didn't it, Steph?
It's always happened. Well, say always happened, but always happened in my lifetime, my career as a player, and now post career. The easy way, or easy, it's not easy. The way to stop anything, isn't it, is by having severe enough punishment and dealing with it in a harsh way. Like I say, whatever law you want to change, whether it's play acting, diving, swearing at refs, time wasting, whatever it is that you want to change, you can't just tickle it with a feather duster and alter the wording of the law. You've got to be severe in a way, and you've got to implement it, and you've got to be strict with it, and you've got to do it. And like I say, footballers are not stupid, managers aren't stupid. They do a good impression, but they're not. They will modify their behaviour if they think it's being taken seriously and implemented properly. So, for example, managers, if they, remember years ago, the technical areas were brought in because managers were going anywhere. Well, they come out of technical areas all the time, don't they? Well, imagine If you come out of that technical area, fourth official spots it, you're off. You're in the stands. No warning, no yellow card, no nothing. You're in the stands. You bet your bottom dollar managers would stay within the technical area. If they're effing and jeffing, or if players are effing, crossing a line with officials, red card, straight red card. That, which is in the laws of the game, foul and abusive language towards an official, but it's hardly ever implemented. But if it was, again, like anything, you'd get a month, 6 weeks of absolute carnage where the players are testing the water and the manager testing the water to see if it's being implemented. But if it was, the game would change, and it would change for the better. But nobody seems to want to make them decisions, seem to want to make them calls to be, oh, crap, that's severe. That's going to cause mayhem for a matter of weeks. But if you want to change anything, you've got to do something a little bit more radical than tickling it with a feather duster. Adjusting Amendment 6, paragraph P, subsection 2 to add a word in that, alters the wording of a law that never is really implemented. You've got to change things fundamentally, and you've got to apply them, and you've got to stick with them. That is the only way to change stuff. If not, like you said, the proof's in the pudding. It happened in my day. It happened before my day. This is after my day, and it's still happening, and we're still having the conversation. But until anything actually changes, until anything's actually done about it, in 20 years' time, we'll still be having the conversation, and in 20 years' time, and so on and so forth. So to change something, you've got to be prepared to stick your head up, be shot at, but stick with it for a period of time. And that is the only way you will change things like the play acting, the diving, the abuse of officials. And by clamping down on that, may then follow down into the lower reaches, the Sunday leagues, things like that. You don't see it on a Saturday, so it sort of drifts out the game maybe on a Sunday, and that might encourage a few more kids, a few more people who want to get into officiating to actually go and do it, safe in the knowledge that I'm not likely to get my car smashed or myself smashed because I give a bad decision. It is a worry, because you think, where is it going to end? Where is it going to end with, officials dropping out the game? If you've not got an official, you struggle for a game.
We certainly won't solve it tonight, and I'm sure it's something we'll come back to. Keith Locke, I once refereed a kids match. Never again would I do it again. It wasn't the kids, it was the parents of both teams. Chris Jordan, imagine a player calling the ref a Forest fan and getting sent off for it. Jurgen Halligan, can remember a few years ago, if you argued about a free kick, the ball was moved forward another 10 yards. They do that a lot in rugby. I think Jurgen's right. I think they did try it in football for a bit, didn't they? And then I think they stopped it. Rings a bell.
Yeah, I think so. I seem to remember it didn't seem to last very long.
Exactly.
Whatever the reason
your
for
point,
it.
Stan, which is exactly your point.
Well, another thing that sort of that came in for a bit. Do you remember anybody who stood on a free kick? It used to be an instruction. You give away a free kick anywhere on the pitch, somebody stand on it to prevent the opposition taking it quickly. You're obviously 6 inches away from the ball. Yeah. And then they tried to clamp down. They brought in a rule that you'd get a straight yellow card. So then you got players kicking the ball straight at you. And because of that, to get you booked, because of that, they changed the rule back again and said, oh, no, because you're getting it, we'll you think, just stick with it. It would stop players doing it, and the game would be quicker. The ball would be back in play quicker. But it appears over time that for whatever reason, that they're not prepared to stick with things and dish out severe punishments.
Another one, Chloe, because sin bins. Because I'm trying to think, kind of, what could the National League do as a testing ground? And miking up is clearly brings with it certain costs and elements. What do you think about sin bins? 10 minutes, down to 10 men.
I think you'd have to create a whole new rule book for it, and it's a good idea using things that work in other sports and bringing them in, but there's a fine line between would that work in the sport that we're trying to implement it into. I think then we're already subjective decisions. What decision makes it that it's a sin bin and not a yellow card, or that it's a yellow card over a sin bin? And I don't. It's difficult. At this moment in time, I feel like people are like wanting to try everything, just to kind of improve it somehow. But I'm not sure. I just think we'll be down a bit of a loophole, and just down a rabbit's hole. I think it maybe just create another problem. But again, it might work. But I just think that we're kind of overcomplicating it now. That maybe we need to strip it back to absolute decisions. Like Stal says, this is what happens if you do X, Y, and Z. This is the punishment. That's it. End of story. We need to kind of take as much subjectiveness out of it. We understand it's football and there's always going to be subjective decisions. Opinions differ. You can't, nothing is absolute in football, especially with fouls and stuff like that. But I think we're then maybe overcomplicating it by bringing something else in, whereas we could try and adapt what we already have to make it better. So maybe miking up the refs might be an answer. That's not doing anything. It's not really bringing anything else in. We can just hear what's going on. Whereas a sin bin is a completely different thing that's never been used by referees. So are they going to be afraid to then give it? And then someone's playing with 10 men for the next 10 minutes. Are they going to understand? Like you say, they don't seem to understand the rules now. Never mind if bringing something else in. What's the training behind it? Who's bringing it in? Do they understand the rules? Like we've said with VAR, the people at the very top that's brought VAR in clearly don't understand like the length of the rules of the game, and that's not helping. So if we bring in the sin bin or something similar, you're going to get the same thing again. The people at the top not really sure how it's being used. That filters down to everybody. That filters down to the referees. They're unsure because the people above them are unsure. Then the fans are unsure. It's just personally, I'm not sure, but you never know what's going to be implemented. We are trying to bring things in from other sports, but I'm not sure that's the right way around it, or bring something in but adapt it. It's just, we've got to get the subjectiveness out of it as much as you possibly can. I understand it's difficult and you're always going to get it, but I think, like Stel said, you've got to knuckle down on the absolutes. What we know for definite has got to end up with some kind of punishment, like a red card or just something extreme. And maybe sin bins, you can maybe get by for 10 minutes, but an extreme would be, no, you sent off the whole game and that's it. You're not going back on. So I think it'd be difficult to create a rule book to kind of be like, well, this means a sin bin, this means yellow card, this means red card, because we can't differentiate between fouls, yellow cards and red cards at the minute without bringing something else in. So I think it'd be difficult.
58 minutes in. Southend United still. They've, I think it's fair to, like ourselves, they've had a lot of issues and problems. They clearly found it difficult in their first year back. A good friend of mine, Stan Collymore, was brought in, I think, to many, quite an unusual role, but one of the first things he did in his sort of football, it's not a football director role per se, but he brought the ex-centre half, the new manager in there, seems to have done a decent job, and they would appear to be much better equipped this year to at least have a go at playoffs than they were last year. How much of a challenge are they going to pose to Notts, do you think, given their recent run of form?
I think a really big one. I mean, you're right. They seem to have got things right this year. Obviously, last year it was Ruben's hat-trick, wasn't it, down there, that won us the game. I think this year, 2 points from the first 3 games, but then they've hit the ground running after that, gathered momentum. The best defence in the league, statistically, against the second best defence in Notts. But 4 consecutive clean sheets, 11 goals scored in the last 4 games, 4 wins on the spin. They're a team in form, and they're a team that's going to be.
Well done. Now you've dropped it all in there, haven't you? We'll hear that.
We're going early enough tomorrow. I've had to do it today. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, you talk about a team in form. That is it, isn't it? The epitome of a team in form. Not conceded, 4 consecutive clean sheets. Brilliant. Okay, they don't score loads of goals. They don't score loads, but in the last few games, they've managed to find the goals. But if you're keeping clean sheets, you don't need to score loads. So a real tough test. Now, I still expect Notts to be able to beat them. I still expect that they've not maybe had a challenge like Notts. They've played Chesterfield and Wrexham, lost to Chesterfield at Chesterfield, drew with Wrexham, 0-0 with them. So tough, a tough game, really tough game. But when you play any team that's in form, high in confidence, you know you're going to be in for a tough game. And as much as I said at the start of the programme about, I think there's a lot of mediocre teams, and the standard at the top is separated, and there's a few teams there. That's not to say that there will be teams during the season that come in and out of form, have hot streaks, hot runs. Do I see Southend scoring enough goals throughout the season to finish top 3, top 4? Possibly not, but I haven't seen them play this season. So I'll tell you a little bit more after tomorrow night. But given the fact that they're not conceding goals, they've conceded 11 in 17 games. Now, that is a team that will potentially have a chance of achieving something if they can keep that going. It's the big thing in the National League. We talk about it all the time. Consistency. How long can they keep that going? We don't know. But while ever they're on that run of form, it's going to be a difficult game, a really tough game for Notts tomorrow night. So again, glad they've had a week's preparation, and I'm sure Luke Williams will have had them really well drilled over that week of what they're up against, because they're up against the tightest defence in this division as we currently sit here.
I think he was at Southend last year, Chloe. I guess really last season you would say the difference between Notts pushing for a title and effectively being in the playoff picture fairly consistently was away form. Yeah. And that's been fine so far, as is all the results so far this year. But two away games, a lot of miles on the clock. For title challengers, you're probably looking at, I would say, clearly you want all 6, but you'd certainly want to win one of the two and get a minimum, let's say 4 out of 6. I certainly think we'd need to do that to still be top come Saturday.
Yeah, definitely. I'm a big believer in when your home games draw you away. It obviously doesn't always work out like that. This season, we've probably averaged not far off that. Like a couple of home draws, but then we've turned the away game into a win. So we've kind of established that kind of form. But with obviously a home game being a draw, I'd like to see us win one of them. That's not saying either is an easy game, especially away from home in this league. Like you say, we bring tactics into it. You bring everything into it. Neither's easy, but yeah, the ideal scenario for me is 4 points out of the 2, whichever way it comes. I'm not really bothered. I don't think 2 draws are the worst results in the world. Obviously, we're kind of looking at the table already as if to say, well, if we draw and Wrexham win, that's our off top spot. But it's a longer game than that. You keep our unbeaten run going. Obviously, I don't want to draw for the rest of the season every game. Do you know what I mean? It's not good enough. If we go unbeaten now to the end of the season but draw every single game, you'll probably fall out of the playoffs. But I just think that they're 2 tough places to go. I'd have taken 2 draws before the Bromley game, and I still don't think that's an awful result. But to pick up a win and a draw would be fantastic, and I'm sure we'd stay up there fighting.
Chris Gosling says, if we want to win the title, then I think it's right that we should expect to turn up and give Southend a real challenge. Not saying it'll be easy, but I expect Notts to put in a performance. Before we wrap up and go back to Stell, Chloe, so I've teased a bit, and for those of you who follow you on Twitter, you'll have an idea. So a member of the Magpie Circle flock, big money move to a former Premier League club. Yeah? Tell us all, what's going on, Chloe?
So after 5 years of being in the Notts ticket office, I've moved up north, so gone back up to the northwest. So I studied in Manchester, and a few of my friends stayed up this way and wanted to be in the football industry, obviously with my degree being in football business and media. So the best thing to do is get yourself northwest. I mean, the amount of clubs that there are, and I felt lucky and already gone to the top of the championship. So I'll be at Burnley now. So obviously I'm still going to stay in a Notts fan, and it works out luckily that a lot of their away games are our home games. So as much as I'd miss out on a few away games this season, it works well that I can hopefully get back to a lot of home games. So it doesn't now mean I'm a Burnley fan, but I would like them to do well for a personal aspect of, I'd love to have a Prem club on my CV, to be completely honest with you. So yeah, so now I'm back up north, living between Chorley and Preston, and yeah, working at Burnley.
So you are going to be, for the majority of certainly home games, you're going to be coming back to watch, yeah?
Yeah, as much as I possibly can. So it like I say, it works quite well. I'm coming down for the Yeovil game, the £5 game, and the Barnet game. I can also make Scunthorpe, so I can do quite a bit. Obviously racking some miles up in the car and on the train, but whatever I can do to come back. I can make Boxing Day. So, and then obviously New Year's Day, we play Oldham, which is great because Burnley are away, so I can come back up north, and there's not many games up here, away games. So yeah, it'll be mainly home games for the rest of the season, but hopefully sneak a couple of away games in as well.
Excellent. And obviously, on behalf of all of us, congratulations. So that now means that the famous questions that used to be asked when Notts fans and our flock were ringing the ticket office up, and whichever female happened to answer, is that Chloe?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. The one thing that I won't miss, though, is as soon as it starts raining, the abundance of phone calls. Is it still on? Is it still on? But in the amount of time that I've spotted Notts, which is getting on for 12, 13 years, I've known one home game to be called off for the weather. So I think that'll be the one that I'm most happy to not have to hear. Well, I'm sure I'll hear it at Burnley, but no, I will miss being at Notts and the camaraderie and knowing everyone. So it's been a great 5 years. But yeah, move back up north.
Chloe, it's a worse pitch at Turf Moor than it is at Meadow Lane nowadays, so you might get it. You might still get that question.
I tell you what, Stallard, I mean, the number of people that have been moving on from Notts, I suppose it's a symptom, if you like, of dropping into National League and things. But journalists moving, Magpie Circle presenters moving. Are you sticking with Notts for the foreseeable future?
Absolutely, I say it's not so bust for me. I've got no other irons in any fire. Say, fine, career-wise, isn't it? It's people who do it for their career, so you've got to respect that. Obviously, Lee moved on. Chloe, we wish her all the best, and it's a career, of course it is. But no, this ain't my career. This is enjoyment.
Yeah, and so clearly it's a hell of a trek down to Southend on a Tuesday night.
Yeah, that's not so much enjoyment.
Is Mr. Slater going or not? Or
yeah, me and Charlie. Yeah, the gruesome twosome back on the road again.
Yeah, good 3 hours, isn't it? And I mean, I always go on the train, and it is possible to come back on the last train from King's Cross to Grantham, which is what I do. So I get back into Grantham about, I think that last train gets into Grantham about 1:45, and then I drive home half an hour. But lots of Notts fans are telling me it's purgatory. Late night returns on the motorways at the minute. M1, A1, M11, you name it. After 10 at night, it's shut, isn't it? Because I know a lot of problems have had issues getting back from Wealdstone.
Yeah, I say it's the motorway network, and it's been like that for a few years now. Night closures, and yeah, you do well to find a motorway that's fully open, don't you? So fingers crossed to everyone going down and everyone coming back, and we'll be there with you, and hopefully coming back in good spirits with 3 points.
We'll finish on a slightly light-hearted note. I know you don't follow social media a great deal, but I think you may be aware that obviously your catchphrase "get in," has got a bit of a life of its own. And have you seen the T-shirts with "get in" on? And there's a T-shirt with your ugly mush on it with "get in" on. That one or two fans are threatening to produce. So what we need to do is, if we get a shirt to you, will you model it, right? Obviously XXL, when you're next on the show. And that should then prompt these people who are looking to mass produce them. Yeah,
right. It's become a bit of a monster, this. I don't know. This has become a bit of a... I'll tell you a thing, I have seen one. I've seen one in the flesh, because we parked just round the corner from the ground, just outside the gates at Meadow Lane. And I forget which night game it was the other week. And as I was coming out of the car park, there was a couple walking past, and the woman goes, "Hey, Estelle, she had to get in," opened a jacket up. And I thought, cracking, it's been 20 odd years since that's happened to me. And she had this "get in" T-shirt on, which, and I thought, oh dear, it's become a bit of a monster. But yeah, What I will say is, and Charlie's mentioned this to me now. Charlie does do. Now he tells me more of what's on social media. Now he's told me that somebody was on about producing it, and somebody had put the, oh yeah, but Stallard wants a cut of it. Let me categorically say, I don't want any money for it. I had nothing whatsoever. If anybody can make any money, if something goes to charity or something goes to the club, great. But it probably cost you more money. I can't see that being a big thing anyway. But yeah. In fact, somebody left us a hat. Somebody at the game against, was it the Bromley game? We got down to reception. Linda on reception. She said somebody's left me and Charlie something. It was a Winter's hat with NCFC Get In stitched into it. But she said nobody left a name or anything. So thank you to whoever that was. But yeah, it's becoming a bit of a monster. I'm sort of regretting ever starting it. But I daren't stop now because we're winning. So yeah.
On that light-hearted note, Chloe, thank you ever so much. Are you flogging a few Burnley tickets tomorrow then? Are you started or?
Yeah, my first day tomorrow, so it's actually match day. So thrown in the deep end a little bit, but I've only got 2 home matches and then we're off for 5 weeks. So I'll still be working there, but I'm not selling many tickets, so I can't complain.
So who's Burnley got tomorrow?
They've got Crawley in the cup, and then they've got Blackburn on Sunday. So it really is
That's
big game.
Burnley Blackburn's a big one up there. Cool.
Yeah, I've been thrown in at the deep end, but it'll be fine.
Yeah, you'll be great, and we'll keep getting you on the show, obviously, because you're seeing the matches. Stell, thank you very much indeed. I suspect now Charlie will be updating you with. Manufacturing updates on Get In. Okay.
Well, now you see why I don't do social media particularly. So yeah.
Very good. Look, thank you ever so much, one and all. Short trip down to Southend. Even shorter trip to Eastleigh. Crikey. Then I'm off to the World Cup. I know one or two you've been a bit of bantering. Yes, I will be revealing the Magpie Circle in Qatar. Yeah, we will be broadcasting live with former Notts County defender Paul Sherlock, who's putting me up, which is very helpful given the cost of hotels in Qatar. So we are planning to do a series of shows from Qatar, timed around England games, and obviously we'll be able to give you an in-the-flesh, so to speak, view from Qatar, and Stell will be able to give us, and Chloe for that matter, will be able to tell us what's going on with Notts. So we will try and merge the two as best we can. I was telling Stell, I have got tickets for 31 games so far. There you go. 2 a day, every day for 3 weeks. So that will keep me busy. Thank you, one and all. Look forward to catching up. We'll plan to be back later this week post Southend. But thank you for now and take care, everyone. Good night.
Cheers.